All right. All right, we're live here. Week 5, hot takes and hot cakes. I'm Matt Harmon, and we're doing the show for Sportable this morning, and I'm with my partner in crime here on Sunday mornings, Dan. How are you doing, Dan?
Good, Matt. Glad to be here again. And listen, guys, if this is your first time checking out Hot Takes and Hot Cakes, check out the website Sportable.is. That's who sponsors us. That's why we're here. Great little website, building in popularity. Just take a look. We got so much content pumping out every day, and it's all little takes. It's kind of like a tweet plus, I would call it. You're gonna get limited characters, but it's really to the point, fantasy news, actionable advice, collection of incredible writers from different websites. Me and Matt hail from Pro Football Focus, Fox Sports, football guys from Matt, Black and Blue Review, Carolina Panthers, incredible little Carolina Panthers website that pretty much does it better than the beat writers, in my opinion, as far as I'm concerned from what I've seen. So really, you're just looking at a collection, and that's just me and Matt, and we're not even the best. So take a look, go head over to Sportable, and hopefully we can answer some of your questions on the show, bring some advice, take a look at the matchups a little more in depth than what you normally hear from a fantasy football show. So yeah, glad to be here for week 5. Should be a good one.
Absolutely, and just to run through the lineup of what we do every week. So first, we'll go through questions that we have now, and if you're watching and you have questions, please send us more. You know, we're ready and willing to answer questions, and we'll circle back around and do them again at the end of the show too. The ones we get while we're live. And so after questions, we'll go through a few of the 5 of the games that really stood out to us and highlight some matchups, who to exploit, who to play, who to avoid. And then we'll bring on our daily fantasy football expert, TJ Hernandez, who does great work all over the place, and he'll give us some daily takes and try to win us some money here. So that will be important. And like I said, when we come back at the end and we do questions, and then we get out of here and we enjoy football. So without any further ado, let's jump right into these questions, Dan. And the first one I'm going to ask, I'm going to answer. A question from our boss. We mentioned Sal runs Sportable, and he asked us a question this week. And since he does employ us and everything, I figure we should probably answer his question first. He asked us, what would you trade future picks wise for Austin Davis in a 1-quarterback dynasty league? This is an interesting question, and one that I think we might disagree on a little bit. Who knows? My thing about Davis is that he's played really well. I think. I mean, he did make a crucial mistake in the game against the Cowboys, and that ended up being an interception for a touchdown. But hey, at the same time, before that he was moving the offense. Kind of in the same vein of one of these backups like Case Keenum that gets in and just kind of offers that willingness to throw downfield and to challenge the defense deep and just use what weapons they have there in St. Louis. So from that standpoint, I think that he's shown he's a viable NFL quarterback, at least a backup level type. Now, do I think that he's going to end up being the starter in St. Louis anytime soon for the long term? No, I don't. I think that he's a guy who is always going to be limited. I don't think he's physically gifted enough to really trade or to really carry a team. So I don't know if you go out and try to acquire him at this point. I don't know that if you sell the farm to get him. Because I don't think that you have a future starter on your hands. I think you have a guy who's going to be a good backup and is gonna move the offense when he gets in, but you never know when that's gonna be. So, as far as future picks go, I mean, I don't think you go trading anything too much. But I think that he's the type of guy that in a dynasty league you want to have around because you can get into an emergency sort of situation when maybe he's the 3rd quarterback you have on your roster if it's a deeper league. And hey, at the same time, there's an opportunity in St. Louis, so if he continues to play well for the rest of the season, maybe he can at least be anointed kind of a bridge starter, a guy like we saw Chad Henne and Matt Castle, and obviously those guys are pretty terrible, so I'm not trying to compare him to their level of play, but a guy who can hold the fort down while a younger quarterback waits, or while a younger quarterback waits to be ready. So maybe Davis is that type of guy. So you actually might get a guy who could start next year. It just depends. We need to see more. But what do you think, Dan?
Yeah, it's crazy, Matt. It's almost as if that we had talked before this. I swear we hadn't. I think his situation compares extremely favorably to the Case Keenum situation last year. It's very weird that you thought that too. It's awesome, I must say. So I have no other comparison to make. I'm just going to stick with the Case Keenum thing because I've been thinking about this one since yesterday when Sal sent in the question. But last year, Case Keenum comes in, puts together 2 incredible games. He's on the fantasy radar. People are streaming him. I remember this last year. I was one of them. He was a daily play for a few weeks in a row. His salary was rampantly low, and people were all over it. So that was fun for a little. But it's a similar situation. They're smaller, statured quarterbacks. They don't have a great arm. They don't have too much zip on their intermediate passes. But they're willing to take chances and throw balls up in the air, as you saw last week or 2 weeks ago with Brian Click on that touchdown pass, and just a few other throws that I watched Davis make that were pretty impressive, and they're pretty risky for a guy with his arm strength. But listen, it's working now. I agree with Matt. It's not someone I would be willing to trade. I don't think he's the future of the Rams. And I think, especially in a QB class that's as loaded as next year's is looking to be, and that really is a stupid statement, I think, because you really never know how these classes
We
look.
say that every
yeah.
fall.
I feel like I hear that every fall, and then we look towards May and we're like, wait a second, this guy's going now 28 overall and he's the first quarter. So
and we all totally fall for it too, so don't
Yeah.
feel bad. Everybody does it.
Yeah, so it doesn't really strike me as too much of a value play, and I'll wrap it up there because I have a lot more on Davis, but the rest of it is going to go in a later segment that's going to seem very contradictory after this because I'm going to advise to play him in today's matchup, which I love, but we'll get into that later.
Well, that's the great part about fantasy is that you have leagues like Dynasty where you have to view things differently than a weekly format, which is great.
Right.
And I think the long-term outlook on Davis probably isn't as good as maybe his immediate standing. So that's just the way this goes. Okay, another question we got, and this one comes in from @Chris Lomas _ or Chris _ Lomas _ on Twitter. That's 2 underscores. Interesting. And he asked us, what the hell do we do with the 3-headed monster in Cleveland? And he's referring to the running back situation, which features the 2 rookies, Terrence West and Isaiah Crowell, and then now it looks like Ben Tate is healthy and might even be the starter. So Dan, what's your opinions? What's your takes on this Cleveland backfield?
Yeah, first of all, I got to say I love the double underscore, Chris, and this is Football Observer on Twitter if you guys want to follow him. Appreciate the comments. Chris, you've been loyal tweeter to us, and that's great.
Chris is the man.
Yeah, you're the man, Chris. As far as I'm concerned, this week, I'll look at the short term and long term. This week, short term, it's a little tough to figure out because, listen, you don't want to miss this Tennessee matchup with this Tennessee run defense. I understand that. But at the same time, there hasn't been too much leaked to the media as far as what we're expecting the workload to be. As far as running has gone, I think that when in Tate's absence, Crowell has looked like the better runner than West. He's less hesitant. He kind of just one cut go, and that's kind of what you want. And he's powerful, and he runs with good pad level. But at the same time, he probably doesn't do the little things as well, like pass protection and things that get you on the field. But let's just remember when Tate was in for the preseason, which I know doesn't matter as much, and for his limited carries week 1, he did look like a very good runner behind this line and this scheme. He's used to this scheme. He knows that he's played in his whole career. So I think that if Tate's healthy, and it looks like he is, he's going to be the lead back here. And that's just, I may be going out on a limb here because we haven't seen much and we don't really know his health to the full extent, but I think he's the best runner there when healthy. I really do. Just maybe not the most talented, but the best fit right now for this scheme. So I'm rolling with Tate going forward for now. And listen, he gets injured all the time, so this is a big factor with Tate. But for now, he knows the scheme best, and he's the best guy right now for the Browns. What are your thoughts, Matt?
You know what? I can see the utility in what you're saying there about Tate, and that the coaching staff seems to want him on the field, because he knows the system and everything. But you know what? I'm over it. I'm over Ben Tate. I get it. He's not a bad player. He's not untalented. He has his gifts, and his knowledge of the system is invaluable. That makes a lot of sense. But I'm over it. I'm over Ben Tate, and maybe you can throw him out there this week, but I don't want to start him. I don't want to start Terrence West this week because we don't really have any clarity of how the split's going to go. All 3 guys have shown well during their time in Cleveland. So, I'm going to really kind of avoid West and Tate specifically this week because I just have no idea. I mean, they've said that Tate's the starter, but how can they possibly go back to him when they have these two exciting rookies? So I don't know. But and that brings me to Isaiah Crowell, who you mentioned, and he is by far clearly the best talent in the bunch. This guy was SEC Newcomer of the Year back in his 1 year stint at Georgia. I mean, he's incredibly talented. Don't look at the undrafted thing and think, oh, well, he's just some undrafted running back. No, this guy fell because he had a few missteps during his time in Georgia. So he had to pay the price for that. But I mean, this is a guy that is unreal. I mean, when you watch him run, he has the tenacity, the aggression, the ability to create, to break tackles, to just stay balanced, stay on his feet. I mean, incredible balance. Like he's tough to bring down, and he has it all. I mean, he's really the complete package as a running back. He can do anything for them, and so that's sometimes it's too easy to say that the cream rises to the top, or that talent eventually wins out. But I think in this case, if you're going to invest in the Cleveland backfield for the rest of the season, I think you've got to make it Crowell, because he's the only one in there that can really be a running back one type of value, a season-changing type of play. If Tate gets hurt again, and then it already sounds like that the coaching staff, from the reports, that they love Crowell and that he's going to start getting the bulk of the work over West. So for me, if you're going to invest in a Cleveland back for the rest of the season, make it Crowell. If you're desperate at running back like I am in several leagues, I am going to roll him out there today and just hope that he takes it, that he takes this job and runs with it. Like I said, this guy's he's a great player in the making. If he gets the opportunity, he's the one that will save your bacon in the Cleveland backfield.
Yeah, I like that take, Matt. I mean, I do think I agree with you. He is the most talented back, even more talented than Tate. There's no real way to argue that. If you watch him, you'll see it real quick within the first 5 carries. It's just he's low to the ground, he's explosive, great pad level. He's a great player. I like that take. It's a good long-term and really a great general rule I do agree with in fantasy is that talent generally wins out. And just one last thing on this is that even though I do like Tate as the immediate fit, Tate does always get hurt. And there are some – I'm a big believer that injuries are a lot of luck, but there are some players that are just more injury-prone than others.
Yeah. Some people's body, I mean, they're just not made to play in the NFL, for whatever reason. It's not anything wrong with them. They're not soft or whatever. It's just a, physiological or biological issue. So, I mean, that's a whole other thing that we don't really need to get into here. But all right, so let's get back to some questions. This one comes in from at Frada Coach on Twitter, and he asks, Victor Cruz or Kyrie Robinson this week? Do you have any strong takes on either player? And I know we're going to cover both of these games, so we don't have to get too in depth with it. So
yeah, so if you want to hear this one, you're going to probably want to stay tuned for our Giants take and when we take the Giants matchup and the Falcons, and then we take on the Saints later with the Bucks. But yeah, to me this is an easy one. I go with Cruz, and I don't even think about it. I'll kind of tell you a little bit more why later. But Matt, do you have any different opinions?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get into this much more, and I actually have a couple thoughts on the Saints backfield that are interesting, so I definitely want to get to those. Cruz, to me, is definitely the guy, going against this Falcons defense, I think, and especially when the Falcons are on the road. We can talk about this later in that game, but I expect a lot of points from the Giants, so I definitely go with Cruz.
Yeah, so, we'll touch on that later, though, so stay tuned.
Yeah, that's one we can definitely get more in depth with later on. Okay, so next question that I got, this one comes in from at Jim Graham 73, and we've been getting a few questions while we've been on the air, which is good. This is great. This is what we want. I'm 0-4. I've got Calvin and Brandon Marshall. Calvin Benjamin in the flex. Do I gamble on Calvin or go with Andrew Hawkins, Allen Robinson, Bishop Sankey, Kyrie Robinson, or Kelsey? And it's a PPR league. So let's break this down in a, what do you do with Calvin Johnson this week after he put up the 2 catches for 12 yards when we knew he wasn't healthy? How do you approach a situation like this where it's an injured guy, but he's the best player at his position? What do you do, Dan?
This is a tough situation. I hate these in fantasy. So I always take a look at these, and if I have a really deep bench and a deep team, it's the only time I'll really ever consider sitting Calvin Johnson. I've been burned with these sits in the past. With Jimmy Graham last year is a prime example when I didn't think he would play much, and then he scored 2 touchdowns in like 13 snaps, I think, or was some ridiculous number. So Calvin's a red zone threat whenever he's in the game. They have Ebron, who's kind of developing into a little bit of a red zone threat for them, and Foria might be back, and he's also a red zone threat. But still, Calvin is the number 1 guy there. So even if he's only playing a handful of snaps and red zone plays and third down plays, he can get his due with like 3 catches for 45 and a TD or 2. So I think that in general rule with a guy like Calvin Johnson is you only sit him for a really high quality bench player and reserve. What are your thoughts on that general theory, Matt?
Yeah, exactly. I think that you see people ask questions like, should I bench, Calvin Johnson for Jeremy Maclin? I think you do that for sure. So if you have like you said, a high quality bench player, I think you could put Calvin on the bench. But in this specific situation, he's got Brandon Marshall, he's got Kelvin Benjamin. I already think that those two are good plays today. Especially Benjamin going against the Bears secondary, and same with Brandon Marshall if he's back to his old self, which we don't know for sure. But so I think he's already got enough value, like enough of a safety net at wide receiver there that he can roll Calvin Johnson out in the flex. And it's a PPR league. I think he'll be more involved this week than last. I think we do this every year with Calvin Johnson. There's one game where we start to hit the panic button because he didn't play, and we just have to see what happens. So for me, unless I don't think Andrew Hawkins, Allen Robinson, Sankey, Kyrie Robinson is good enough to put Johnson on the bench. So okay, and this is another question from the same guy. So he's still 0-4. Do you ride the Houston defense or drop them for the Browns, who have a good upcoming schedule? Steelers, Eagles, or Giants defense? So what do you do here? What's your feelings on the Houston defense right now? Do you ride them or do you start streaming them like for a matchup like the Browns have against the Titans this week?
Yeah, so Houston defense is an interesting take for me. I started streaming them already last week. I originally drafted them and then decided it might be a decent idea to cut them last week for the Colts defense against the Titans and Charlie Whitehurst. That somewhat worked out. The Colts they scored a good amount of points, but so did the Texans. The Texans are a good defense even without Clowney. They get a lot of pressure. They generate a ton of pressure, and it's like Romeo Crennel. It seems like to me every time Romeo Crennel comes in as a defensive coordinator or head coach, like his defenses get like a nice 6 to 8 game start of dominance and then just completely collapse on themselves. So I think they're still in that grace period with Crennel. But in this matchup, we'll get a little more into it later, but I think the Cowboys are going to control the clock for the remainder of the game. That could be a good thing for the Texans defense if they are able to generate pressure and cause turnovers, but it could also look a lot like that Week 3 game they had with the Giants, where the Giants Rashad Jennings ran the ball 34 times for $174 and just controlled the clock. This is really how you beat the Texans. I think you run at them and instead of letting J.J. Watt kind of get after you. And the Cowboys, this is their blueprint. So I don't like the Texans' defense this week. Even though they're going to be on the field more, I don't think it's going to help them this week. The Cowboys will run the ball a lot. I don't advise to stream the Steelers' defense because they're just playing too poor football right now. You have to really just look into it, and they let a Tampa Bay Bucks team that couldn't score on anyone all season put up 20-plus points. Yes, I like Glennon, and I've been saying this for a while, a lot more than McCown, but he didn't turn into an incredible quarterback out of nowhere. More importantly, their offensive line didn't all of a sudden become passable in the NFL. It's just a matter of the Steelers' defense is really not playing well right now, and they're injured as well. So I'm not going to advise them. I'm also not going to advise the Eagles' defense. That, to me, has looked extremely poor as well. Michael Kendricks is out again. He's their big playmaking linebacker who makes plays in the run game, in the pass game, in both coverage and blitzing. And without him, they have to rotate guys like Casey Matthews in, who's about as unathletic as Mark Herzlich on the Giants. They're kind of in the same boat. No disrespect meant at all, but maybe there is some. And they're still getting burned over the top. They take chances and blitz. So, I mean, you can maybe get some turnovers there, but Austin Davis is protecting the ball pretty well, as we talked about earlier. So All right, I'm gonna have to roll with my out of these four defenses. I'm gonna tell you to take the Giants defense. Yeah, this is not a great matchup for the Giants defense, especially because if the game flow predicts that they're gonna have a big lead, they're gonna play a lot of zone. But listen, look at this Giants defense. When they get ahead, Perry Fuel's scheme works pretty much to a T. They generate pressure and they force turnovers. Last week against the Redskins, they forced a bunch of turnovers. I think it was 5. Cousins threw 4 interceptions, and they forced a fumble. The week before against the Texans, the same situation. They got out to a big lead. The game flow worked in their favor, and they forced multiple turnovers against the Texans as well. So that's kind of how the scheme's set up. It's the whole idea is to force turnovers. And this Falcons offensive line is going to be playing with a lot of guys, and we'll touch more on this later, but I'm going to tell you right now that the Giants defense is my call. Matt, do you have any different thoughts on that, of those 4 Ds?
Here's my general take on defense, and you did a good job running through that, so I'm not gonna waste too much more time there. So I think that you have to stream defenses. You can't rely. So specifically, should you keep relying on the Houston defense? No, I don't think you should, because you're gonna get a week like when they went up against the Giants, and to that point, in the season we thought that this Giants offense wasn't very good, and obviously they've turned it around now. But you played the Texans that week thinking you were going to get a good matchup, and look what happened. So they got worked, and I think it's tough to recommend playing any defense on the road. It's just so much more beneficial to even play like a decent defense when they're going at home than seemingly better play when they're on the road. Defense is so fluky; anything can happen. I don't want any. I don't want to rely on any one defense. For the duration of the season, unless it's theoretically the Seahawks, but I never drafted defense that early, so I don't have them in any situation. So I don't think you rely on any one defense, but yeah. So that's an interesting question. We don't get to talk about defense a lot on here, that's fine. All right, so here's another question. This one comes in from @SunilJohn79, another really good follower of the show, and he asks, RG3 is on the waiver wire, now expecting to be back in Week 8. Is it worth picking him up and dropping Brady at this point? There are no other quarterback starters on the waiver wire. So, good. We get to talk about Tom Brady and everything going on with the Patriots offense. I'm going to go ahead and take this one first, if you don't mind. And I think that you probably do go ahead and make this move, especially if it's in a deeper league. I don't think Brady is worth rostering at this point. And I don't really like having a backup quarterback on my roster anyways. I think you can play the waiver wire for a backup quarterback. So I don't generally roster 2 quarterbacks unless I'm trying to flip one for a trade, which is really hard to do because there are so many good quarterbacks. So for me, I think you take a chance on bringing RG3 on. You're obviously not going to get a return on him for a little while. It might not happen at all, but just as kind of a speculative ad. And I know, I tweet back and forth with Sunil a lot, so I don't know if this is his 20-team league or not, but I know he is in a 20-team league, and I know that in a deeper league like that, I would think you want to bring on the upside play in Griffin, and it doesn't look like Cousins is going to hold that job. What a surprise! But yeah, so so mostly on Brady, I think he's definitely droppable at this point. There are a lot of other guys I'd rather have this week. He's not playing well, and it's not just his supporting cast. I know it's always blame everybody else but the golden boy. But Brady's not playing well, and I think as a fantasy owner, you have to hold him accountable for that, and don't have him on your roster, and certainly don't be starting him until something looks different. And I just don't see that happening this week, especially against Cincinnati, but anytime soon, really. I mean, he's 37 years old. Players drop off. They don't stay at their Hall of Fame level the rest of their career, and I think that's what we're seeing now with Brady. Dan, do you have any differing opinions?
We see this one a tiny bit differently. So Brady, I will agree with you. It's not all the fault of his supporting cast, but there's a lot of blame that needs to be said about his supporting cast. I mean, you're looking at his supporting cast involves like Julian Edelman as his big threat at receiver, a guy who can't really. I mean, he can kind of separate. I don't know what I think about Julian Edelman at this point. He catches a lot of passes. It seems like they're scheme based. Can't really do much deep. And then he's playing with a Gronk at like, what is Gronk playing at, 60% right now? I don't even know. When I watch Gronk, he doesn't even look like the guy that is the dominant Rob Gronkowski we're used to. He's kind of just his same size and 60% speed or something. I don't know. But he doesn't really have many weapons. Another guy I just want to touch on is Shane Vereen. I can't believe how disappointed I am with Shane Vereen. I think he's lost explosiveness at like an incredible rate since I watched him at Cal, when he was kind of this like jitterbug beast and just making just cut after cut, and he just looks slow and he gets stopped on his cuts and just like caught from behind. I'm not a Vereen fan at all, but we can get into that at another point. But anyway, the fact of the matter is, Brady doesn't have the weapons. And what defenses are doing, Matt, and this goes into the point you made about Brady losing a little too, especially at age 37, is they're kind of just clamping down. They're bringing everyone up. They're bringing the safeties up. And they're saying, Brady, beat us deep. It's a formula that's worked pretty much since 2011. Even dating back to like earlier years, his deep ball has been off for a while. The stats back it up. I don't have any numbers in front of me, so I won't try to make any up, but you can look into it. Brady's deep ball stats have been awful for a long time. So this is what defenses are doing. They're saying beat us deep, and there's no receiver who can beat them deep because Aaron Dobson is not active for them, and he goes 6'3" and he runs a 4.4, but they don't want him on the field. So their offense can't stretch the field at all. So everything is close and uptight. They're not moving the ball well through the run game because of what I think is the main problem with this Patriots offense, their offensive line. I can't believe how far this offensive line has fallen off after years of just being a dominant force up front. After the Mankins trade, they took a step back there, but the real issue is Nate Solder. He has been like a dominant left tackle in this league, top 10 year after year for Pro Football Focus, and this year he's in the bottom 10. Something must be up with him. No one really knows. I've asked some Patriots guys, and they don't know what the problem with him is. There's no reported injuries, but he's getting burned week after week. Tom Bahali just whooped him last week for a sack fumble on Brady, and he's a big issue with this team right now. So I think it's okay to drop Brady, as crazy as that sounds. And then touching on the Redskins thing, I won't go too much into it because, Matt, you tackled this well, but I will give you some props. A couple weeks ago when I was red hot on the Cousins bandwagon, you cooled me off big time, and you said, I don't care what you saw on film, I don't like Cousins. And it's only been one bad week for Cousins, but it was pretty ugly. I rewatched that game, and he was staring down receivers, which is obviously not a good thing you want to see from your quarterback. And he just didn't look as good as I thought he might. So yeah, I think you tackled the Redskins question better. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad move. I do think RG3 will be back there.
Yeah, I'll close out on both Cousins and Brady. Because I love to hate on bad quarterback play. So with Cousins, the thing is, you saw it last week. When he's in a groove, he can play well. But when he gets into a funk and things start going bad, they go bad. They go real bad. I mean, you saw him throw those first few interceptions, and then they just started coming at an alarming rate. I mean, did he throw 5? Was it 5 interceptions?
No, it was 4, and he had the fumble.
Or the fumble, yeah, 5 turnovers, excuse me. But, yeah, and you just saw him on the sideline looking completely dejected. And that's the player he is. Once it goes downhill, it goes, and it's gone. I mean, he can't get it back. He turns into a turnover machine. Because he has too much confidence in his very average physical skill set. And then with Brady, I mean, look, I know like you said, there is some fault in his supporting cast, especially his offensive line. But I'm telling you, if you took the jersey off Brady right now, put James on the back of his jersey, and I don't know why that was my thought, but James James on the back of his jersey instead of Brady, you'd be like, why do the Patriots have this guy in there? I mean, why are they playing this guy who has no arm strength, is afraid of pressure and isn't comfortable out there? That's what he looks like, and I mean, I think that's just the reality. But anyway, so that's all the hate we'll throw on the quarterbacks there. Okay, so back to it. We've been getting a lot of questions while we've been talking, which, like I said, is a good thing. So this one comes in from @Trammell and he asks, Heath Miller, Andre Johnson, Gronk, and Cruz. I need one tight end and a flex. So I think we're going to probably agree on this. I think you play Gronk over Heath Miller. I'm still on the Gronk train. It's only going to get better from here. Even though Brady is terrible right now, Gronk will still get his. I mean, we've seen that over and over and over again. He's even if he's at, like you said, 60% right now, it's going to get better, and he's way too talented for me to ever bench. I mean, that's the reality of it for me. And I think we've already talked about Cruz, and I think I'm putting him in the flex over Andre Johnson. What do you think? Do you agree?
Yeah, actually, I think you're in an incredible situation here. You have three players that are pretty much, I think, you'll go right with here in Gronk, Heath Miller, and Victor Cruz. Out of the two of those, I will single it down to Cruz and Gronk, but I don't think if worse comes to worse and you don't agree with us or you have a good feeling about Heath, I won't blame you because he's got an incredible matchup this week against the Jaguars. And although I will caution you to say that the Jaguars have been equally as bad against the run as they are against the pass, which is not the same with the Buccaneers. So the game plan may be more tailored to Le'Veon Bell, so keep that in mind. But Gronk scores in almost every game he plays, so you're almost guaranteed. You're not guaranteed a touchdown, but the law of averages tell you that you're very likely to get one. It's kind of like playing pocket aces in poker. In poker, you want to raise with that. And then lastly, Cruz, will get a lot more into that in a little bit when we preview the Giants-Falcons matchup, but I think he's a very strong play this week.
Yeah, for sure. And I just saw a waivers come across my email that I want to pick up the person that was dropped. So I'm gonna run and do that. But let me get to the other question. Someone just dropped Talaferro in a league I'm in, and I want to go pick him up real quick. So yeah, go ahead.
I'll tackle a question I just got from one of our loyal followers. So I'll tackle this one, and it's from Luis. It's Luis2789. Big fan of you, Luis. You're always asking questions, which is always good. We want to tackle as many as we can on the show. So you sent me a lineup, and you kind of asked for any changes I would make. Right now, you've got the KC defense, I think you said, and you want to change it for the Eagles defense. I wouldn't do this. Eagles defense may have caused some turnovers this year, but they're really giving up a lot of points, and I don't like this matchup against the Rams. However, looking at your lineup, you're starting Andrew Luck, Alfred Morris, Kyrie Robinson, Bradshaw and Harvin, Bradshaw, Harvin, Kelvin Benjamin, and Gronk. I would actually move out Kyrie for Chris Ivory. This is a bit of a risky play, but Ivory's really talented, and Ivory saw the most snaps that he's seen all season last week. It looks like the Jets are finally making the move to get their most talented running back the most snaps. Seems like an easy idea, but it's taken Rex Ryan a long time to get it. As long as he doesn't revert back on that very smart idea, I think he's going to see a lot of snaps this week, Ivory, and he's going to be able to do a little better than Kyrie Robinson because really in the Saints matchup, it's more of the Saints. The matchup is more tailored to the Saints exploiting the Bucs through the air. So I like that move. Will Kyrie get some garbage time running? Yes, but I just think the upside is a little bit higher with Robinson. Did you get your pickup in, Matt?
I'm doing it right now. I messed up something, but this is me. So can you read me that question again?
Yeah, it's basically showed me his lineup. He sent me a screenshot. And he wants to know if you would do if you would change an Eagles defense for Kansas City, and then you'd have to kind of see the screenshot. But it's basically Kyrie Robinson or Chris Ivory.
I'm gonna go with Ivory. I think he's the better running back right now on the team by far. So I mean, yeah, he's passed Chris Johnson up in my mind for sure, and it should have happened a while ago. He's the better running back until he's another guy that always gets injured, and it'll probably happen again. But for now, I think you ride Ivory and Robinson. I like Robinson a lot, but I just haven't seen enough to think that he's going to take that job and run with it. I could be wrong there, but I think I'm going to go with Ivory.
Cool. We actually got another question in kind of
Yes.
via. This is interesting. I've never had a question like this, but I like it. Via Fantasy Gumshoe, Jeremy Hart, one of our boys over here at Sportable. He kind of relayed the question. It's from Joey G at Jeggy4, and he asks, do I sit Ertz for Austin Seferian Jenkins, Clay Harbor, or Dwayne Allen? You want to tackle this one first, Matt?
Yeah, I think that you can definitely go with. I think you could sit Ertz this week. It's a pretty decent matchup, and I like ASJ a lot as a guy who didn't he play every snap last week for the Buccaneers. I think he can score a lot of points this week against the Saints, even though they're at home. that defense has not been good. I think ASJ is a sneaky good play this week. I would feel comfortable sitting Ertz for him because, while Ertz could go off, that Eagles offense is so unpredictable. Who's going to get the volume in the passing game that week? And I think ASJ is going to, especially with Mike Evans out, I think he's going to be the number 2 target there after Vincent Jackson. So that's a good one.
Yeah, I love that. I love that call right there. I wrote ASJ into one of my matchup pieces this week. I'm a huge ASJ streaming fan this week. Just to confirm what you just said, Matt, he did play all 71 offensive snaps last week. And this is in comparison to somebody like Ertz, who doesn't really play every offensive snap. Last week he played 43 of the 60. He plays some 11 personnel. It's mostly 12 when they use Selleck and him. Occasionally they'll roll him in with some 11, but you're just getting much more volume with ASJ, and I'll touch a little bit more on this matchup in a little, but just the cliff notes of it are he has a real strong chance to be Glennon's number 2 target in this matchup with Mike Evans out. He faces a Saints defense that has been not able to cover anyone this year, and some of their biggest issues have been at safety with Kenny Vaccaro, who's really reversed form. Last year he was almost the defensive rookie of the year, especially in the second half. We turned it on this year. He's been unbelievably bad, especially in pass coverage. And a couple linebackers like Ramon Humber and Curtis Lofton, who are really more suited to stop the run as 2-down thumpers. They can't really keep up in the pass game. So if ASJ is an inline tight end, I think he'll do well against those linebackers. If he's put in the slot, I think he'll do well against Vaccaro. I think he's going to have a real good game. I'm going with Austin Seferian-Jenkins here.
Yep, I'm glad we both agree there because we're so smart. Okay, so I'm going to call a little bit of an audible here. I know we have a few more questions left, but I'm going to save those for the end of the show so we can start digging into the games because we've gone pretty long on the questions here. But that's fine. That's what we like to do. We like answering your questions. So if you've asked us one and we haven't read it yet, we're going to get to it at the end of the show. And if you have more, keep them coming. We'll get to them. Okay, so let's dig into the 5 games we picked. And I know you want to highlight the Giants and Falcons since you're a fanboy. So please, Dan, go ahead and tell us what you think about this game.
Yeah, I deserve that, Matt. I never hit it here for the show. I probably should have, but I was very tempted to wear my Eli jersey today, but I didn't. I'm gonna wait for one more.
I would have made fun of you so bad. So don't do that ever.
We'll see, Matt. We'll see what he does today. Anyway, this is a matchup I really love for both teams. Really, it's not just the Giants. Offensive players. I think this will be one of the most high-scoring games this week, and that has to do with the fact that it's just a game flow issue. So the Giants run the 8th most plays right now, the 2nd most offensive plays, and the Falcons give up the 8th most defensive plays. So, and this was a stat that Pat Thorman pointed out. Basically, he pointed this one out in his column called Snaps, Stats, and Pace, which is an incredible look at the weekly pace and game flow of different games. And it's really an awesome thing. You guys should all take a look at that. But anyway, so you're going to see a lot of offensive plays. And really, this Falcons defense hasn't really been good at anything. Even including that, and this is in their aberrational game against that's not even a word, against the Bucs, where they just played different than they've played in the other 3 games this season. Is factored into these grades, but they've been the 12th worst run defense. They have guys like Paul Warrilow and Jonathan Babineau who played pretty good last year, but aren't playing as well this year. Warrilow has been really bad against the run after looking like an incredible undrafted free agent last year. They have guys trying to transition to a 3-4 like O.C. Umenyiora, Corey Bierman, Jonathan Mesquay. They're kind of playing out of position as a linebacker, and they're not setting the edge well against the run. So you're going to see a lot of Jennings eating in this matchup. I think he's going to run very well. And then Eli Manning is going to have a really, really good game, and so are his receivers in this one. The Falcons don't have a pass rush, so they're graded out as the 4th worst in the NFL this year. They have only 3 sacks through 4 games, so that's really bad. I'm sorry, they're graded out as the 4th worst, and when I say that, I mean according to Pro Football Focus, who obviously charts things like pass rush and different things like that. And one major thing I don't like about this Falcons defense is that they give up a lot of yards after the catch, the pass defense. So they've allowed 61%, 572 of 933 passing yards to come after the catch. They're really poor tacklers in the secondary. Their nickel package alone on defense has missed 10 tackles already this season. Their best safety, William Moore, is headed to IR. He won't be playing this week. And this runs perfectly with the Giants' offensive scheme. Ben McAdoo's scheme thrives on his pass catchers and his playmakers making plays after the catch. And that's perfect in an offense like this against a defense that can't tackle, quite frankly, and doesn't get pressure. So I think it results in another incredible matchup. Eli Manning is just, it's hard to, I don't think it's smart to judge Eli Manning off of last year or any of the years compared to this year because he's just running a really different offense. So normally he'd be in the middle of the pack as far as average time, as far as, what's the word here I'm looking for? From snap to throw. So he snaps the ball and then time it takes for him to throw the ball. That it's usually he's in the higher towards like the 15 to 20 range as far as. But this year he's getting rid of the ball in 2.27 seconds. It's the second shortest time in the league, behind only his brother Peyton Manning. He's running a different offense. He's snapping the ball. He's quickly reading where the right read is. He has He has outlets like safety valves, like Larry Donnell, who he's never had. And the result is over the last 3 games, he's gone 75 of 106. That's over 70% completion rate, 811 yards, 8 touchdowns. And I don't think it stops here against the Falcons. On the other side of the ball, I think you got to play your Falcons for one major reason. Even if they do get behind, and I know you're worried about this offensive line that's going to be starting a new left guard in place of Blaylock, a new center in place of Hawley, a new right tackle in place of Holmes, but Perry Fuel's defense likes to play zone once they get ahead, and I think the Giants will get ahead in this one. And if that's the case, he's just basically dropping into zone, and there's a ton of underneath stuff for Matt Ryan. And also, I really think that the Falcons will scheme. They're not stupid. They understand that they have these issues up front on the offensive line. So I think you'll see extra blockers in and just quick outlet throws, plays designed to get rid of the ball quickly from Matt Ryan's hands. What are your thoughts on this one, Matt?
Oh, yeah, this is the type of game you start all your fantasy players in. I mean, the Falcons, you have to temper expectations for them because they're on the road, and it's just proven that Matt Ryan and the whole team is just not as good when they're on the road. And I think you play Julio Jones, you play Roddy White, you play Matt Ryan, regardless, because you probably don't have better options, especially Julio Jones. I think he'll get his no matter what. But then the running backs, I'm avoiding that situation completely, not even just in this game, until further notice. There's really no clarity on what they're going to do there. Antoine Smith is actually, ironically, the one I would play if I was desperate because he might just break out for those, random 50-yard touchdowns that he keeps doing. But anyways, in general, I'm avoiding the Falcons' backfield. But as for your Giants, man, I mean, they're gonna eat this game. I mean, they are. I saw the line is the Falcon or the line on this game is what, like the Giants -4.
Yeah.
They're gonna get. I mean, they're gonna win by more than that. Like I guarantee it. I mean, the Falcons are bad on the road. Their defense is terrible. I mean, they don't have any good players right now. I mean, no one is. I mean, who's playing well on that defense? William Moore was playing all right, but he's out. Desmond Trufant has taken a bit of a step back from his really great rookie year. So I think that the defense is just bad. It's just bad, and you've provided a lot of great stats about that. So I think. If you're playing in daily leagues, I think Eli and any one of his receivers is a great stack. I mean, Cruz is an obvious candidate. Donnell, I think, is going to have another big game. When they get in the red zone, I mean, they look for this guy, and the Falcons don't have any linebackers or safeties that can compete with a big body player like Donnell. So that's actually the one I'm going with a lot, is that I'm playing Eli at quarterback, and then Donnell at tight end. And, of course, we can get TJ to talk about how to approach that in daily leagues. And Rashad Jennings, I think, has a chance to finish as a top 5 back this week. So, yeah, I mean, I'm playing all my Giants. I think it's going to be a big week for them.
I just want to touch real quick, actually. I'm sorry, Matt. Didn't mean to cut you off. But earlier we had a question about Cruz, which we said we'd get to later. So just to focus in a little more on that matchup, which I agree with you. Donnell may be the best matchup overall, just because of the red zone presence that he brings and the linebackers and safeties that the Falcons are going to try to throw at him. But Cruz also has a really good one. You mentioned Desmond Trufant, outside cornerback. And then Cruz won't face him, but Cruz is going to match up with Robert McClain in the slot. McClain has played 98% of his snaps in the slot. Cruz has played close to 90% of his snaps in the slot. So that's a matchup that we'll see all day. And McClain is not a good cornerback. He graded out as the 62nd best out of 90-plus qualifiers last year, according to Pro Football Focus, in pass coverage. His rating is exactly the same this year. We know what we have from him, and he's not a strong slot corner. Cruz is going to be able to beat that matchup all game. And just want to throw a little caution on the Anton Smith. And I don't really know why he hasn't earned more snaps, because he's clearly the most talented back. And I've been saying to bench Steven Jackson for a while. It's pretty much obvious what you get from Jackson. It's 60 yards. If you get your TD, he's playable. If not, it's 5 to 6 points. He doesn't catch any passes this year. He's in for like 4 to 10 pass plays per game. Some of those are pass blocking snaps. So I mean, like, he's not even involved at all in the passing game. Bench Jackson, but Anton Smith played 9 snaps last week. It's been this way the whole year. It's like 9, 10 snaps, 6 sometimes. They mix in Freeman. They mix in Jaquiz a ton. So it's just a volume thing for me. But he does touch the ball every time he's in. He had like 6 of his 9 snaps were touches last week. But, yeah, and he's explosive, but he's not getting the ball enough. But those are just 2 final thoughts on that matchup.
All right, so we'll move right along to the Panthers and Bears.
Nice.
Yeah, so this is an interesting game. We know Carolina is kind of reeling right now. They've been blown out by 2 AFC North teams the last week, and now they get the Bears at home. I mean, it's rough in Carolina right now. You look at their offense. Kelvin Benjamin so we'll start off on the bright side. Kelvin Benjamin has developed into an every week starter in fantasy leagues. I don't think you put him on the bench. And it's great because you got him late enough that he's probably your 3rd wide receiver, and he's going to give you at least wide receiver 2, sometimes wide receiver 1 value when he scores a few times. This guy's a constant. He's their number 1 target. Cam loves throwing to him. It's a go. I mean, I don't think you bench Benjamin. And against this secondary that's not very good. He's gonna have a big day. He's gonna be. It's interesting because I never thought I'd say this about Kelvin Benjamin, but he's gonna be consistently productive. I like everything I've seen from him. He's done nothing to, And the good thing about Benjamin is that he has those lapses. He will drop passes. He will make mistakes. But the Panthers, rightly so, just keep feeding him. Just keep going back to him, which instills confidence from Benjamin that the organization is not going to go away from him even if he makes a mistake, and that's really important for a guy like him. So they've handled him perfectly, and he's an every week starter in fantasy leagues, and this week included. Greg Olsen, I think, is a consistent option. He did have a pretty poor game last week, which was a little surprising, but he's a guy that I think you can consistently start at tight end and expect your 60 yards, maybe a touchdown, 5 catches or so. So he's a guy I like. There are certainly better options, but I think he's pretty much going to be an every week, tight end, a starter at tight end. Now, the rest of the offense is a mess. Things obviously aren't great for Cam right now because he's throwing the ball really well, but just not getting the volume to be. He only has those 2 great options to throw to, so he's playing really well, but he's not healthy, so he's giving you nothing on the ground. I think there are way better options than Cam this week. I mean, and this is not a reflection on him as as a football player, because I think he's playing really well. I don't buy into any of these narratives that it's his fault. I mean, he's getting beat up. He's obviously still hurt, and so his rushing value is just nil right now. So he's a guy I think that you don't play this week. And then you look at the backfield and you see just a cluster of a complete mess in that backfield. Mike Tolbert is on short-term IR. Jonathan Stewart's still hurt. D'Angelo Williams is hurt. It looks like they're going to have a committee of Darren Reeves, Fozzie Whitaker, Chris Obanaya. Taron Poole got some snaps last week, and probably most people listening right now are like, who the hell are these guys? And I don't blame you. I mean, there are a lot of unknowns. Most of them undrafted. I'm pretty sure, they were all undrafted. Now, Reeves is the guy who got some playing time last week. They brought him up from the practice squad. He's a guy I did a little tape piece on Black and Blue Review. I did that this week. Actually, just to brag on myself real quick, if you type in Darren Reeves into Google News, that article's the first one to come up. I was kind of like, oh, that's pretty sweet. I'm still amazed that people want to hear my thoughts on these things. But anyways, so Reeves this week, it's not a good run defense in Chicago. He might, if you're desperate, I think you can roll Reeves out there because he has. What I found when watching the tape on him was that he has good vision. He's really intelligent. He makes good decisions as a running back. He sets up defenders well in the open field, and he's got a little bit of elusiveness to him, but he just doesn't have the power right now He goes down on first contact a lot. So it's kind of dicey as to whether if he'll even be the lead back. But I think if you're desperate, you can play Reeves. He's a quality guy in the passing game too. Maybe he gets a few catches in PPR leagues, and I think the Panthers' offense does really need that. Does really need that right now. They need a guy like Reeves who can catch the ball out of the backfield. So maybe he has some PPR relevance today. I don't know. It's all speculative because this offensive line isn't very good. So that's the backfield. And I also really like what I saw from Fozzie Whitaker in the preseason. Maybe if he plays, if he's healthy, he can get some go. So in general, I think this is a situation you avoid. But I am interested to see what Reeves can bring today. On the Bears side, I mean, I think all of your Bears are a go. This defense in Carolina has fallen off. Run defense wise, I think Forte is obviously going to have another big game. Marcellus Bennett is like the top tight end in fantasy leagues right now. And I think that'll continue. Luke Kuechly has been pretty poor in coverage. Thomas Davis didn't play last week. I'm not sure if he's starting this week, but Bennett has been a consistent guy all year, and I expect that to continue. And Marshall and Jeffrey, I think you keep rolling them out there, and they're only going to get healthier as the year goes on. So kind of long-winded, but that's my take on this game. Dan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Matt, you pretty much covered that really well and hit on points that I would have made myself. So the only thing I will say on this one is I don't really feel like the Carolina Panthers have too much of a home field advantage in this one, and that works against them in the sense that I'm a little worried about game flow for your Panthers. This Panthers run defense has not been the same without Thomas Davis and without Greg Hardy. Now Charles Johnson is out as well. He was not grading out very well against the run anyway, according to Pro Football Focus. And on tape, he didn't look as good either. They don't have Mike Mitchell to set the tone in safety, and Thomas DeCoux is not playing the run well. So if the Bears have been run blocking really well. They just kind of torched the Packers' run defense last week. That's been pretty good in every game besides this last game. For over 100 yards for Forte, and I think they can control the clock. Even though they have an incredible offense and people give Trestman his due, and he deserves it, they don't really run an up-tempo scheme, the Bears. Pat Thorman obviously writes about this in his snaps and pace piece, but they take their time on offense. So I'm a little worried about the Bears controlling the clock, controlling the ball, and not limited opportunities for Cam that offense. So that's my one take that adds to some of the things that Matt really touched on that he really did a great job on.
Okay, so we'll move right along from that game, and we'll go to the Saints and Bucks. Now, Dan, I'm going to let you take this first because it's the one that you picked. But if you take my sleeper call in this game, I'm going to be really, 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 really mad at you. So I'm going to let you go first, but I just want you to let you know that our relationship is on the line.
Wow, well I've got big shoes to fill. Then I almost hope I don't take it, and I don't plan to. My favorite call here, and I'll just get right into that. First, is not a sleeper by any means, and I like Brandon Cooks a lot this week. I'm rolling with him daily in almost every league. So there really is some truth to this narrative. The Saints are a much better team at home. It sounds stupid, but it's the truth. They're better in the dome. They have the crowd behind them and everything. And this week, Breeze and company are going to draw this Buccaneers defense, fresh off another beatdown in the passing game, the hands of Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, Heath Miller. If you just look at this, in the last 2 weeks, the Bucs defense has allowed 50 of 64 passes to be completed, 78%, for 611 yards, 5 touchdowns. That's 2 weeks. It's miserable. They're currently PFF's worst pass defense. They're the 6th worst pass rushing team. They really don't do much. And this week, Cooks is gonna see a lot of Jonathan Banks, who is PFF's worst cornerback. He has allowed opposing quarterbacks to have an 123.6 rating. He's allowed a 17-207 one line against him. That's 70 receptions for 207 yards and a touchdown. Just last week, he allowed 4 more catches for 63 yards and a touchdown against the Steelers. Well, why will Cook see him this week? Well, Jonathan Banks lines up almost exclusively defending the X receiver, the split end at right cornerback. And Cooks has seen a lot more snaps now on the outside at split end. With Stills back, they're running a lot of Colston in the slot on their 11 personnel 3 receiver sets, and that kicks Cooks out to the X with Stills playing a lot of flanker. I mean, they mix and match. Sometimes Cooks will play the other side, but he will see probably 30 to 40% of his snaps against John Van Banks, and that's great. That matchup's unbelievable. I really love Cooks in this one, and I like all my Saints in this one. I like Breeze to do well, but I am going to throw a little caution on the Saints' running game. The Bucs, while they've been really miserable against the pass, haven't been that bad against the run. It's a bit of a scheme thing. They're set up in Lovey's scheme to defend the run, and it's working pretty well. They have Levante David, who's a great player. They have Gerald McCoy, who's back now, and Michael Johnson, who's always been known as more of a run-defending defensive end. So I don't love Kyrie Robinson this one, while others might. I don't love Pierre Thomas, and Travis Cadet got 20 snaps last week, which I found interesting, but I'm not going to say to go with him yet in deeper leagues. On the other side of the ball, we touched on Austin Seferian-Jenkins, who I do really like in this matchup because, as I mentioned, the Saints' pass defense has almost been as bad as this Buccaneers defense. The only difference is that they're still generating pressure, but their coverage is almost worse when you factor in the kind of pressure they're generating. Unfortunately for them, Jairus Byrd went down in practice, and Jairus Byrd, I don't really know. It went down with practice, and he's out for the year now. He had been playing better than people think. Everyone's like, oh, he's not playing well, Byrd. He'd been playing decent, better than Kenny Vaccaro at least. So they'll slide in Raphael Bush now at the other safety spot. But their pass D has really been weak overall. Their linebackers don't cover well. Their corners don't cover well at all. Keenan Lewis went from a top corner last year to a forgotten man this year. And on the other side, they try Corey White, Patrick Robinson. They're both really miserable, the second corner. So I really like this matchup for Vincent Jackson. Can he finally get this going? I think it has to be the time. He's had another week of practice with Glennon. He still drew 10-plus targets last week. He didn't do much until that final touchdown on the last play, which saved fantasy weeks. But I think he could get going this week. My one concern with the Bucs offense that I want you to keep in mind is game flow. I think the Saints will have the ball. Offense will have the ball for most of this game. What are your thoughts on this one, Matt?
All right, so I mentioned that I was going to drop a sleeper there, and you did mention his name. Traveris Cadet, you mentioned he saw 20 snaps last week, and in those 20 snaps he was targeted 6 times, and he caught all 6 passes for 59 yards. That's a pretty safe floor in a PPR league. I mean, no, we cannot count on it again, but hey, look, I haven't been impressed with Pierre Thomas one bit this year, and you know, in their game last week against the Cowboys when they were in catch-up mode, it was Cadet getting the looks and not Thomas in the passing game. And you know, fantasy owners were really interested in Pierre Thomas this offseason. Was he going to play? You know, was he going to get more catches in the wake of this Darren Sproles departure? And here we are, and it looks like Cadet is a guy that the Saints are at least interested in rolling out there. And this could be a completely bad call. But you know what? In a deep league, in daily leagues, especially on DraftKings, who has a full PPR, and you know he's only minimum pricing there, I'm rolling with Cadet in a few daily lineups this week. You know, especially in GPPs. You know, their $1 million maker this week. I have him there as my flex option because he's a pass catcher. He'll get points. I think he's got to, if he plays, I'm probably going to be one of the only guys playing him. So you know, I think we can talk about that with TJ later. He's smarter than I am about the contrarian stuff. But anyways, Cadet is 210 pounds. He has good speed. You know, I'm rolling him out there as a speculative play this week, and that's really all I'll say about this game because otherwise you did a good job covering it. We mentioned ASJ is another sneaky good play on the Bucs side. And Glennon, I think, is a guy, if you're desperate, you can roll out because I think they'll be in catch-up mode a lot, and the Saints don't have a good secondary. So, Traveris Cadet, I'm gonna put that out there this week, and we'll see what happens. Maybe you all can come back and make fun of me later.
Listen, I love the bold call there, Matt. And if you want to come back and make fun of him, I hope you at least then go back to our Week 4 podcast last week and listen again and find out that we were both very strong on Eddie Royal, who had a breakout week. You can also just go back to my article last week on stacking, where I also had a big blurb on Eddie Royal before his breakout. So listen, these calls they go out on a limb. They're looking at matchups, and sometimes we'll be right, sometimes we'll be wrong. But I just want to throw a little support Matt's way in case the Cadet doesn't roll out. I did love what I saw from Cadet last week, and just from following the Saints this preseason, they were raving about what he's able to do. And listen, that Darren Sproles role has not been filled by Cook. Some speculated it might, and maybe they want to bring that back to their offense. Maybe that's what they felt was missing from their offense through these first 4 weeks. And if that's the case, Cadet could be the guy to do it. Pierre Thomas has looked he hasn't looked as explosive as he's always been, so I like the call, Matt.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the support.
Always there for you.
So we'll move on to the next game, and that's Chiefs and 49ers. I'll start this one off since it's one that I picked. And what's interesting is there's a lot of players on this game that are fantasy relevant. The Chiefs are coming off that big Monday night win over the Patriots, which really was an ass kicking, surprisingly so. The Chiefs right now, let's talk about them. Let's talk about them first against this 49ers defense. Alex Smith, this is his revenge game. Smith played pretty well on Monday night, and I think he's always going to be a better play at home than on the road, but I think he's a guy you could start this week. That San Francisco secondary has given up a lot of big plays. Jimmy Ward, their first-round rookie, he's given up some big plays to receivers. So while there's obviously no great wide receiver, I'm still not rolling with Dwayne Bowe. I know there's a narrative out there that he toasted Revis this week, but I know he beat him on a couple of curls and easy routes like that. So I'm still not interested in Dwayne Bowe at all. As far as the running backs go, I think Niall Davis is a good kind of we'll see what happens flex play if you're desperate, because they're still looking to get him involved even with Jamal Charles back. And Charles, I think he's back. He's back to being an every week play. You can throw him out there and you don't think twice about it. And that brings us to the man, the myth, the legend, probably the only reason I wanted to talk about this game, and that's Travis Kelce. And oh man, Travis Kelce! I mean, he is this guy is incredible. I mean, you could see it on his film when he was a college player in Cincinnati. This guy was just wow. I mean, he's so gifted. He's so incredibly agile for a guy who's huge. I mean, he plays the game with a aggression, a reckless abandon. I mean, he's so good after the catch, and he's still seeing limited snaps, but his efficiency in those snaps is just unreal. I mean, I know, and everybody knows about it now. So we saw it on national television, and that's going to be a big deal. And somehow he's still super cheap on daily leagues. It just obviously because it was a Monday night game, they haven't had the time to catch up yet. So this is probably the last week that you can play him cheap if you want to put him in as a flex play. I know the 49ers are good against tight ends. I know they're Patrick Willis especially is a good coverage linebacker. But you know what? Travis Kelce's a guy I'm probably not putting on my bench ever again because he's incredible. He's too good. I mean, yeah, you might have some weeks where he's not involved as much, where he doesn't get all the looks every time he's in the game. But you know what? Sometimes there's just an unstoppable force, and I think Kelce is that unstoppable force in the Chiefs' offense right now, and he's eventually going to be their best player on offense, and I think that's going to start happening as we go through the season. So, Kelce, it's all I want all the Travis Kelces. I do, and so if you're looking to sell high on him, you could sell him to me. But anyway, so yeah, he's a great player, and I think he's an every week play at this point. And on the 49ers, I mean, I talked about Travis Kelce. I don't really care about the rest of this game now. But on the 49ers side, I think Colin Kaepernick is a better play when he's at home than when he's on the road. He gives you that. He's not a great passer at all. I mean, I think he's almost maybe even regressed a little bit in that format. But as a fantasy option, he gives you that safe running floor, and I think he's going to take off a few times this game. That Chiefs secondary is one you can exploit. They're not playing as well as they did last year. And as far as the rest of the offense, the running backs are probably a situation I'm looking to avoid right now. I know that Frank Gore got over on his one long touchdown catch, and they did feed the ball to him, but they have been weird. The 49ers have been weird about their run calls. They have seemed intent on passing the ball a ton. So I'm not really, unless I have to, I'm kind of trending away from Gore and Carlos Hyde. And in the passing game, I think it's pretty much Michael Crabtree, and that's it right now. I'm not really enthused about playing anyone else in the passing game. Crabtree and Crabtree too is always a little banged up, so he's a dicey play. Other than Kaepernick, I mean, this is an offense that I'm kind of starting to avoid a little bit. I know it took a long time with my Kelce diatribe there, but Dan, do you have anything to offer on this game?
Yeah, well, if I don't talk about Travis Kelce, I just don't know if I can go on my day. So I'm gonna add a little about Kelsey. And then there's not much more to add. You tackled most of it, but he's just I really hadn't done when he came out into the draft. I watched a little bit of tape on him, but not much. So I didn't really know what kind of player he was. I saw the incredible measurables, and I saw the off-field stuff that dropped him to round 3. But I figured, like, if he's going that late in round 3, how good could he really be? Well, I was entirely wrong. This guy's unbelievable. Watching that game on national TV, he was unreal. Like, I couldn't believe how agile and fast he was for a guy that size. And at this point, the main point I want to make here is that I think that what we really saw, which is most important there, is that the offense is now changing and suiting and kind of working the passing game is now working around Travis Kelce. And this is what we've wanted to see all year. Andy Reid finally realized that he's our best playmaker on offense in the passing game besides maybe Jamal Charles, and let's use him like that. And that's how they finally used him. And couple interesting formations I love from Reid. He's not the greatest coach, but he has some great offensive formation, personnel groupings and stuff at times. He had a shotgun formation with a running back and Kelsey on the outside and like a bubble formation in a stack. And it's just kind of like pick your poison. Alex Smith will snap the ball. He can either hand it to Charles, and if you don't commit your linebackers, he'll fake the handoff and throw it out there to Kelsey in the flat just for him to dominate after the catch with some blockers ahead. So I love that. And one interesting last take I'll make about this game, because I don't have too many strong thoughts about the 49ers, especially with the Chiefs' defense playing a lot better last week against the Patriots, and probably have a lot more confidence as well. But one more last take on the Chiefs' offense is that Charles and Nile Davis split snaps last week, almost down the middle. Charles had a few more. And Davis looked pretty good. So will Andy Reid finally, for the first time in his whole career as a coach, go away from the feature back, workhorse back snap distribution and split it up a little bit between these two? My friend Evan Rubin, one of my boys, called me crazy this week for making that comment. And I'm not saying it will happen, but could it happen? It's not a bad idea to keep Charles fresh. It's not a bad idea to not use him as a workhorse as he returns from injury. So I'm interested to see that going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, Nile Davis is good, too. I mean, he's a really talented back, and he looks like he's definitely made himself better as a professional than he was as a college player. So I think that's a really smart idea going forward. Somehow, all of a sudden, this Chiefs offense is exciting, and that's mostly thanks to Kelsey and Davis. So we'll move right along to this our last game, and that's the Rams versus the Eagles. Dan, let's go ahead and break this one down. There's a lot of interesting fantasy players. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, Matt, this is actually one of my favorite games, and with your Travis Cadet call, I'll make a big call here too. It's probably not as big because a lot of other people have been making this call this week, just based on the matchup, but I'm rolling with Austin Davis in my 2QB league as a streamer. I've been hit with buys and injuries in that league. Carson Palmer was supposed to be my boy this year, and he put up 23 in the first week against a tough Chargers defense before getting the nerve issue in his shoulder. I wish I could have seen that one coming, but I didn't. So I'm rolling with Austin Davis in my QB2 spot, and I love the matchup this week with this Eagles defense. There's so many reasons for me to like Davis this week, but one of the main ones is the game flow. Just as a general thing, and I talk about this every week, I feel like on this show and every other show I'm on, or anything I'm on, any article, is that when you play the Eagles, the opposing offense, whoever plays the Eagles, is going to get a ton of snaps. The Eagles run an up-tempo pace. That means more snaps for the opposing offense. So I love that. I love that he's going to be on the field a ton. And Davis has looked pretty good this year. He's earned an overall positive grade on Pro Football Focus. He finally earned the respect and accolades from Jeff Fisher, his coach, who's like, you know what, he's our starter, even when Sean Hill is healthy. He's looked really impressive. So the difference with Davis is that he's a much better quarterback when not under pressure. He's completed 100, this is an incredible stat, but he's completed 100 of his 128 pass attempts, 78%, for 4 touchdowns, 1,040 yards, and 1,040 passing yards when not under pressure and when not blitz, when those two things combine. Obviously, all quarterbacks are better in those situations, but the fact of the matter is those are pretty great stats. It's allowed him to kind of chuck the ball up for his receivers, throw it into tight spots, and let them try to make plays. So I love him this week, and this draws me to my next matchup I really love, and that's Brian Quick. Brian Quick is going to be the main beneficiary of this. He's a huge big play threat. He's averaged 14.7 yards per catch this season. Obviously, big plays have been a big factor in that, but that's great. He draws Kerry Williams this week in coverage. Kerry Williams has been so bad this year. So, I mean, he doesn't draw him for the whole game. I shouldn't say that, but he's lined up as the split end on 60% of his snaps. and Cary Williams has defended the split on 99% of his snaps. So it's going to be a big chunk of those guys. And Williams is getting targeted 7.3 times per season, Cary Williams, and that's for good reason. He's been the 14th worst quarterback in pass coverage on Pro Football Focus. The stats back that up. He's allowed 19 catches for 266 yards and 2 touchdowns through only 4 games. Opposing QBs have an 117.9 rating when targeting him. He's the guy they want to look at, and there's going to be a lot of Davis to Quick this week, and I'm really excited about it. On the other side of the ball, you start your Eagles always. As Matt mentioned before with Ertz, when breaking that one down, it's really tough to find out, and I've been saying this all year, who's going to get the catches, who's going to get the plays from this Eagles offense. But I like Macklin this week, and I think he's an every-week guy. And I will say this, if LaShawn McCoy can't break out and dominate against this Rams run defense that has been one of the worst in bottom 5 run defense on Pro Football Focus this year and last season, no changes to help them, clearly. If he can't do it this week, I don't really know when he could, and then I would sell on him and use his name to get you some value back in a trade. This is the week. Keep it in mind. I'm going out on a limb here maybe, but I'm saying if McCoy can't dominate this week, put him on your trade block to an owner that still views his name more than his actual production and outlook going forward. What are your takes on this one, Matt?
Yeah, man, you brought up a lot of good stuff, especially on McCoy. I think that if he has another poor game this week, I think this is really going to be the telling point where if it doesn't happen this week, it might be a while till it happens again. But if he goes off on this game, then you're going to have no chance of trading for him. So I expect the Eagles to score a lot of points this week, and I expect this to be a game where the Rams are going to need to throw the ball a lot. And that brings me to a guy that you highlighted, and that's Brian Quick. I love Brian Quick now. I don't know. I know we haven't mentioned this on the show here yet, but I do a series called Reception Perception. It's my own wide receiver methodology. A few sort of numbers that I've come up with, and basically it's an in-depth way to evaluate wide receivers. I run a weekly piece on it, using it on Football Guys. And last week I did Brian Quick, and I did his first 3 games, and man, I was impressed. His SRVC, which is success rate versus coverage scores, were great. Especially he runs 14.5% of slant routes, and he has a SRVC of 91.7. That's incredible. That's some of the highest I've ever seen. Curl routes, he runs 13.3% of those, and he has a 91.7% success rate. So he's just really good on these short routes. And he's a big body, so he uses that well now, which was not something he did during his early years. But it looks like he's developed coming out of a small school. And you're right, I charted him as playing on the left side of the field 56.5% of the times, and that is gonna have him matched up with Cary Williams, who is terrible, as you mentioned. So yeah. I think Quick is in line for a big game. If you're interested in reception, perception's kind of my baby. You can ask me more about it on Twitter and everything, and I love to talk about it. So and you can find that information, the information about the project in general on the Backyard Banter, which is my website, and then there's a weekly piece of it on Football Guys like that Brian Quick one. And so I think, long story short, Brian Quick is going to have a great game today. I almost guarantee it.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. You guys should definitely check out Matt's piece on reception perception. I stumbled upon it this summer, and I was extremely impressed. Like, there's a lot of in the fantasy industry, we all see there's a lot of articles, a lot of different things. But when there's something unique like what he's doing there with reception perception, I think it really deserves a look. He's looking at different routes, looking at different things that make a receiver go, and I really think it's just a way for you to get a unique take on fantasy football. So why not take the advantage when you can? So yeah, let's move on after that one. But I like that take.
All right, yeah. Actually, let me go ahead and I forgot to invite TJ. I'm so stupid. I'm going to go ahead and send TJ an invite right now, and he's going to come on for our daily fantasy segment. While we kill some time real quick, let me get a question in that we got on our YouTube page. And this actually comes from a good friend of mine, AJ Chase. AJ, I appreciate you asking questions, dude. You're awesome, and I'm always here. Always here for my boys. When my boys have questions, I'm here for them. So I think we got to get this one in real quick. AJ asks us, I'm playing in a head-to-head league on ESPN Fantasy Football. Who should I play in my running back 2 slot this week? Chris Ivory or CJ Spiller? Dan, you take that one real quick for my friend here.
Yeah, I'm going Ivory here. It's not the greatest matchup against the Chargers' run defense, which has been much better this week. But like I mentioned earlier with Ivory is starting to get the majority of snaps here in the Jets' backfield. Last week he saw the most snaps he's had this season. That should continue because Rex Ryan's finally realizing, okay, he's our most talented running back here, so let's get him the ball. On the other side of things, CJ Spiller to me is a game flow back. I only use him in games that I think the Bills will either be ahead or will be in the game with a back-and-forth type game all game. I do not foresee that this week against the Lions. I think they'll be behind, and that means tons of snaps for Fred Jackson. Fred Jackson plays almost every passing down snap, and 2 weeks ago when the Bills fell behind really, really far, Spiller played just about 25% of the snaps. So you don't want to be playing a guy who's only going to be on the field for 1/4 of the plays.
Yeah, it's really annoying to me the way that the Bills use C.J. Spiller because I think he could be a really great screen back and a back they get out in space in the passing game. I think he would excel in that role, but the coaching staff seems to have no interest in using him in that fashion, which is frustrating for me because I like Spiller. So to AJ here, I'm going to answer this, and that if this is, I'm assuming this is a standard league, if you're looking for a safe floor in your so look at the rest of your lineup and decide what you need. And this is something that fantasy owners always need to focus on doing. If you need a good floor play, you need someone who is going to get carries. You don't have to worry about that. I think then you go with Ivory because he's in the better matchup. He's a guy that he's going to get carries. He's the lead back there now. It's not something you have to worry about game script. And for that reason, I think if you need the safe floor play, you go with Ivory. But if you look at the rest of your lineup and it's going to be good and you need that one player to kind of push you over, then I think you play Spiller because he can always bust off that long run. So, let's go ahead and appreciate that question from AJ, and so it's something we got to look at, ceiling versus floor. So you can look at the rest of your lineup and see what you need. All right, and now we're going to move right along to our daily fantasy football segment with TJ Hernandez, the man in the daily fantasy industry, the smartest guy out there. So TJ, before I give you too much more fluff, why don't you go ahead and give us your takes this week for daily leagues?
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you?
What's going on, Teach?
Terrific. I'm going to try not to drop out during this time when you're on.
Yeah. Let's try to keep the technology on point today. Before we jump into it, just got a Twitter question sent to me from Jason D at the Beaver9, asking who should I play for my second wide receiver: Kelvin Benjamin, Alshon Jeffrey, Vincent Jackson, or Emmanuel Sanders.
Is he in a two-man league?
Yeah, I know. I was like, well, who's your first receiver? For me, it's between Kelvin Benjamin and Alshon Jeffrey, and I kind of lean Benjamin just because he has a bigger market share, more red zone targets, and that Chicago secondary is just small and bad, so I kind of favor Benjamin there. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I like that call. I mentioned on the show earlier that Benjamin, there's probably not a receiver who gets more volume than him right now, even when he makes those mistakes. They keep going back to him. So yeah, Benjamin I think is an every week starter at this point in fantasy leagues.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm good with Benjamin there. Like Matt said, he's an every week starter. I don't think Jeffrey's a horrible play, but like you said, Benjamin, I really think TJ hit on this one perfectly. So I have nothing else to add. Really, that beats it.
All right, cool. Well, let's jump into some DraftKings where everyone's attention is on the Millionaire Maker this week. So I'll just kind of go over some plays that I like in the Millionaire Maker. Before I jump into that, I'll just kind of point on the biggest glaring values I think on the site this week are Rashad Jennings and Kelvin Benjamin. You guys touched on why they're great plays already, but I mean Rashad Jennings at 5,500 and Kelvin Benjamin at 4,800. Are just really cheap. I think you have to get them in your cash game lineups, and then you probably want some exposure to them in the Millionaire Maker that you're playing. depending on how many lineups you're playing, but I think you wanna get those guys in as many lineups as you can. Overall, the pricing's really soft on DraftKings this week, which is probably just a function of having this millionaire maker with 92,000 plus people in it. I think DraftKings kind of wanted to set the pricing soft enough where they're not going to have a huge amount of overlap. They're going to have a lot of new players on the site, so they don't want to leave a bad taste in users' mouth. I think where if you tighten up the pricing and have just a few obvious plays, you're going to have a ton of overlap. So I guess I could kind of see why they do that. It kind of hurts the skilled players, so to speak, a little bit more, just because it adds a little bit more luck. It's going to be a lot of studs versus studs in cash games, so I would kind of advise cutting back on your cash games if anyone's still entering lineups. I cut my cash game lineups in half on DraftKings this week just because it's going to be so much of studs versus studs in those lineups with so much room to move. But yeah, let's kind of jump into some of the plays, and I guess let's kind of, if you guys don't mind, I was thinking we could focus on some super contrarian plays since everyone's playing this millionaire maker. I mean, there's 92,000 entrants, so no matter what you do or who you play, someone else is going to have them. But you want to kind of target a couple players that if you can find someone that's 3% owned, 4% owned that hits, then you have a little bit of a chance. So one guy that I'm looking at, just going down the list of lineups that I've made, Clay Harbor, who the tight end for the Jaguars. I think he had 8 targets last week. He converted all 8 to catches. The Jaguars are going to be playing behind against Pittsburgh. They're down 2 wide receivers, so a lot of people are going to be on Travis Kelce at that $3,000 price point. So I think Clay Harbor is a really nice play that probably going to be an under-owned guy with so many cheap tight ends this week. If you want to move up a few more dollars at tight end, Heath Miller has a great matchup against Jacksonville. Pittsburgh's going to be shooting. They're probably going to put up a lot of points through the air. A lot of people are going to be on the Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown stack. If you want to put out Roethlisberger, Heath Miller stack, you can imagine a scenario where Pittsburgh drives down towards the goal line a bunch, and those turn into 2 or 3 Heath Miller touchdowns. Not probable, but it's possible. You can imagine them getting near the goal line, and at $4,000. In a tournament this big, you don't just want a guy that could meet value. You want a guy that could exceed value by 6-7 times what you're used to. And at $4,000, he's a guy that can he can get to 2 or 3 touchdowns if you're really lucky. You guys already touched on Brian Quick. He's not going to be a super contrarian play, but at 5,900, he's gonna open up a lot of room for you to do some nice things elsewhere in your lineup. The Eagles are obviously not a great coverage unit. They rank, I think they're dead last in 4-for-4 adjusted fantasy points against wide receivers. They're 29th, so they're down there. And obviously Brian Quick's going to get a ton of the looks there. On the other side of the ball in that game, if you really are looking for someone that might be kind of under-owned but it's going to see a lot of volume, you guys touched on how bad LaShawn McCoy has been right before you jumped on here. But he's still seeing 20 touches a game. They're favored by 7, and he's the most expensive running back on the site. So, yeah, I don't recommend him in cash games, but I'm probably going to throw him in 1 or 2 of my millionaire maker lineups just because people are going to look at the pricing, see he's the most expensive back, see that he hasn't been good this year, and he's LaShawn McCoy. They're favored by 7, so there's definitely a scenario where he can have his breakout game today. St. Louis has actually been decent against the run, against running backs as far as fantasy points allowed, but that's even more reason to take him in this huge field tournament where you need some players that are going to hit that a lot of players aren't going to own. Moving on to a couple wide receivers that I really like. A lot of people are going to be on Brandon Cooks this week, which is a great play. I have Brandon Cooks in a lot of cash games. I'm going to have him in a couple tournaments, but Kenny Stills is $1,000 less. He was their deep threat last year. we saw last year what he could do with the deep ball. He was one of my favorites coming into this year as a second-year wide receiver, and he's finally kind of getting into the groove a little bit. We've seen the targets go up the last couple of games. Obviously, New Orleans is going to attack Tampa Bay through the air, so Kenny Stills is a really interesting play. You can kind of imagine Kenny Stills getting that 80-yard bomb, hopefully 2 of them, and if he's a guy that breaks out, then you're gonna have a pretty low owned player that can really separate you from the field, and a lot of people are gonna be on Brandon Cooks this week. Another player that's probably gonna be really have a really low ownership percentage that's really interesting is Jericho Cotchery. The Panthers have pretty much no running game to speak of. He only had 5 targets last week, but he actually converted them all, and I believe he had more yards than Kelvin Benjamin last week. He's $3,000. You guys kind of already touched on Chicago's secondary. Without Peanut Tillman in, they're Tim Jennings and who's their other quarterback over there? Kyle Fuller. They're both under 6 feet tall. Jericho Cotchery's 6'1". Kelvin Benjamin's obviously he's 6'5", so they're going to have a huge height advantage. They're probably not going to be able to run the ball very well just because they don't have any running backs left. So Jericho Cotchery is an interesting minimum salary wide receiver if you really want to go off the board. He's probably going to get a few looks. If you remember last year, he was a big contributor in the red zone for the Steelers. So he's another interesting minimum salary guy if you're looking for something super contrarian. Another guy that could have his breakout game today. His touches have been going up. His footwork is better. Bishop Sankey. He's finally getting that footwork. So Bishop Sankey's at 4,700. He obviously hasn't taken over completely just yet. He's gonna eventually. If you want to get him into your millionaire maker lineups today, hopefully he breaks out, and a lot of people may not be on him just because he hasn't had a ton of work yet. So Bishop Sankey at 4,700 if you want to go cheap but want to avoid kind of the I think Chris Ivy and Kyrie Robinson are probably the super popular cheap plays this week. You probably want some exposure to them, but Bishop Sankey's a guy that's still pretty cheap that a ton of people might not be on. So those are just kind of some of the super contrarian picks that I haven't heard too much about, but I've kind of spotted that if they hit, then they're going to give you a pretty big advantage as far as ownership percentage and make an argument for anyone saying it's a contrarian play, but I think those guys are good enough choices where you can feel good about your process by putting those guys in and not just throwing stuff against the wall and hope it sticks.
Okay, TJ, let me, 1, comment on something you said. 2, ask you a question. So first, let me just say one thing real quick on Bishop Sankey. I know that it's really funny to make fun of the footwork thing, and I get it. But I wasn't really a big fan of Sankey as a draft prospect. I know he has great measurables. He hasn't put those together yet. And while he is averaging over 6 yards a carry right now, I think if he does get a bigger workload, I think that'll definitely come down pretty sharply because he's getting easy carries right now. When they're falling behind, and he's running a lot of draws and easy read plays. But so just a little caution. I'm playing Sankey in a few lineups this week, so we'll see what happens.
No, I 100% agree, and I wouldn't touch him in a cash game, obviously, yeah. And he's not anchoring in like the majority of my lineups, but I think he's just a guy you want some exposure to. Just again, 92,000 people, you got to throw someone in there that's going to hit. That's going to be fun. It's going to be uncomfortable. Yeah. A lot of these guys in here. I wouldn't bet money that any of the guys I've been sharing are going to blow. Well, I guess I am betting money, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't throw him a cash game.
Just 2 more points on Sankey, actually. I'm with TJ on this. It's a good call. I'm a little skeptical that it's as much of a contrarian as he's making it out to be, just because Evan Silva kind of featured him as like the main picture in his matchups article and like called the matchup article something about Bishop Sankey, which can't be good because you know how many people just blindly follow RotoWorld and don't do any other research. But I love his play this week for a few reasons. One, he's seen his snaps increase over the last 2 weeks, and he's had some season high in snaps last week. So clearly, Wisenhunt's finally starting to realize we got to get him on the field. I agree, Matt, that there's a kind of a debate over Sankey's talent among the fantasy community. Some people really like him. He had great measurables. Some people don't really like his tape, which is understandable. I went back and looked at some of his games on Draft Breakdown, and he may not be big enough to really be a feature back. But keep in mind, the Browns' run defense has been really weak this year, according to Pro Football Focus, and that's a huge factor as well. So I think it's an interesting, and I like the call.
Yeah, no, for sure, it's a good call. I'm not a big fan of Bishop Sankey, so I need to take every possible chance to throw water on that fire. But anyways, and I'll ask you, TJ, about one kind of a contrarian, or at least I think it's a contrarian play, and I could be wrong because you're smarter than me. I mentioned him earlier on the podcast. I said it on Twitter. I think Travaris Cadet is a good play today. You know, he's minimum price. DraftKings is full PPR. He's a guy that looks like he's taken a few of those pass-catching reps from Pierre Thomas. I know I have him in my. I only entered one because I'm not that crazy. I only entered one lineup just for the hell of it in the $1 million maker, so I'll probably lose my $27. But I put Cadet in as my flex. Do you think there's any value in what I'm preaching today, or am I totally off base?
No, I like that a lot. I mean, like you said, Pierre Thomas's snaps and touches are going down. He's really kind of, if last week's any indication, he's really starting to get phased out. I kind of said Kyrie Robinson's going to be probably one of the most popular plays. So if you want to get a piece of that backfield, that's probably a good angle to go. The line was at 10.5 when open. I don't know what it's at now, but it's probably going to be a situation where we could imagine New Orleans getting up big, and then just kind of getting their backs involved. And you said we saw them get Cadet some touches last week, so I like it. If he gets a couple of those goal line carries and can score a touchdown or two, then at minimum salary he's going to give you. He could be that guy that hits for you. That's going to be 2-3% owned. So yeah, I like that a lot because I think only people are going to be on Kyrie Robinson. You touched on a couple things there that I kind of wanted to hit on, just kind of general theory ideas. You talked about putting him in your flex. If you're building your lineups for this millionaire, in any GPP, really, you should be doing this. Whoever you put into your flex, make sure it's the guy with the latest game. So we have New England and Cincinnati on Sunday night, and Seattle and Washington on Monday night. So I have a couple lineups with Percy Harvin in there. So he's going to be in my flex, because what will happen if you're lucky enough to be in the hunt for that $1 million, then you can. DraftKings has a late swap that we've talked about quite a bit on here. Say you're going, say you're in second place. Going into Monday night, the Millionaire Maker, you could either win $1 million, you could win $100,000, and then I'll take you guys all out to a nice steak dinner.
Yeah. You better buy me more than steak.
Hotcakes. I'll buy you lots of hotcakes.
Yeah, there you go.
So say you're in second place, and you got Percy Harvin going in your flex on Monday night. If you're in second place and you look at the guy who's in first place, you could kind of do some reverse engineering and some game theory. And if you figure out that same person is most likely playing Percy Harvin after you kind of look at their players, see how much salary they have left, then even though Percy Harvin's your best play, if you're in second place, you have to switch out Percy Harvin too. And the reason I say put him in your flex, because maybe you throw in Alfred Morris. Maybe you throw in a receiver that's a little cheaper. Whatever the price point allows, you have to throw in a different player, because that's the only way you're going to be able to catch the guy in front of you. So whoever your latest player is in your GPP, make sure you throw him in your flex if possible. And when you're in second place tomorrow and you switch him out and he wins you, and Alfred Morris wins you the $1 million, you can throw me $100,000.
Wow, I love bringing game theory into this. You're killing it, Tej.
Well, I sure hope that one person was watching the show.
Yeah, dude, game theory on daily fantasy, you can't beat that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I think those are the major points I hit on that I wanted to hit on this week. Not too many other players that are really off the board. Hopefully one of us is sitting with $1 million. at the end of the day tomorrow.
Let me tell you what, guys. If I win that $1 million, which I'm not going to, you will never see or hear from me again. I will be gone. You guys will have to carry the show without me. You'll never see me again.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, I didn't put too many lineups in there. I mean, I'm still trying to adhere to bankroll management a little bit. I'm a little bit over my usual weekly tournament lineups, but it's tough because usually I have so many lineups that I can just kind of get exposure to all the guys that I want. But since I'm playing a little higher price point than usual, my lineups are cut down, and I'm just sitting here staring blankly at the screen, deciding which of the 50 lineups I put together that I actually want to put in play. So
yeah, I hear you, man. I'm moving to a new apartment on Tuesday, so I'm like, I can't blow all my money on this.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We're all trying to be smart, but trying to win a little money out there and have some fun. So TJ, really appreciate you coming on again. Invaluable.
Thanks for coming on, TJ.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Hey, one quick last thing. If anyone's playing on DraftKings, the Millionaire Maker's kind of taken over the whole website. So there's a ton of overlay in some other games. They have a huge 50-50 going. I think it's supposed to be 8,000 people or 16,000 people. It's only halfway filled, so you're almost only have to be in the top 80% to cash in that 50-50. They have another $27. Their weekly $27 contest there's a ton of overlay, but I don't know if you can. I can't put my $27 ticket in any other contest because if that hits and it's the Millionaire and it's not in the Millionaire, I would. You guys might not see me for another reason.
Oh, that's great. That's terrific. All right, well, TJ, that's some good stuff. We appreciate you as always, and we'll of course talk to you again throughout the day and next week, of course.
All right, good luck today, guys. Thanks.
Thanks. Same to you.
Later.
All right, Dan. Well, let's close this out with. We have a few more questions, and we'll go ahead and get out of here. One that we got while we were yakking during the first segment, and this comes from @jheath_23. Another good friend of mine, and he asks Edelman, Crabtree, or Andre Johnson in the flex. I know what I'm leaning towards. Just curious what you think.
Edelman, Andre Johnson, or who was it?
Michael Crabtree.
Okay, I'm going to be leaning towards Crabtree here. The matchup isn't amazing, but the Chiefs secondary has looked the worst of the opposing secondaries that we'll be facing. The Bengals secondary is to Edelman. Obviously, Edelman gets his volume, but that's a really good secondary, and whoever is going to be matched up with him will probably do well. And then Andre Johnson has really regressed to a second receiver there, and I think the Cowboys, as I mentioned earlier in the show, will control the clock, and game flow will not be on the Texans' side.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Crabtree's the way to go. Like I said, he's really the only one at this point in that 49ers offense that I think is going to be a consistent good play, other than Kaepernick. So I'm going with Crabtree out of the options here. Man, I wish I could play Edelman, but just not right now. So okay, we got that question. One more that we had that you sent me earlier. I need a PPR flex starter out of these: Vernon Davis, Anquan Bolden, Allen Robinson, Torrey Smith, or Devin Hester.
Which Robinson was it? Allen?
Allen Robinson.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll take this one real quick. I think if you want the floor, you might look at somebody like Torrey Smith here. Vernon Davis is injured. Bolden hasn't been a big part of the offense. And really, Torrey Smith, he's not running too many routes. He's not getting too many targets, but he has a really good chance at a big play in every week. And the Colts defense hasn't been great. But as far as ceiling goes, I actually want to say Robinson has the one here. I can't get off this Allen Robinson bandwagon. I don't know what it is, but I think that he's going to be the number one target with Blake Bortles very soon. And when that happens, he's going to have a decent floor, but also a high ceiling because he's going to get a ton of targets. So I'm going with Robinson here.
Yeah, I'm actually going to say the same thing. Vernon Davis is the one that he's not expected to play today, so I don't think he can play him. Bolden, I already talked about the 49ers offense. And Robinson, I mean, right now I think out of all those guys, he's probably the one that's going to have the best volume. He's growing up with Bortles. He's had 5 catches last week, 7 the week before that. And Pittsburgh is a really bad secondary. They're not the team they used to be. This is a bad defense, and the Jaguars are probably still going to be behind because the Pittsburgh offense will score a ton of points. So Robinson, to me, they'll be throwing the ball, and he's going to be the one that gets a lot of the volume. He's a guy that I'm excited about too, Dan. So I think he and Bortles long term are a great connection. I think he's a guy you can roll out this week and actually get a pretty good floor and a high ceiling from. So. What questions do you have? Because I think I'm out over here.
We got two more, and then we'll wrap up the show. It's been a longer one, which I don't mind, Matt. I enjoy talking with you about football every week. So this is one of the last two. It's one more for you from Joey G, Jeggy4, one of our new loyal followers, big fan of him. So he asks, one more for you. Heath Miller, Greg Olsen, or Mike Floyd, pick two. So I'll tackle this one first. I definitely want to get Heath Miller in this one, which probably doesn't seem like the obvious option, but his matchup is just too good to avoid here. And then as far as Olsen versus Floyd goes, I think you'll probably have the best take on this, Matt, because of your close ties to the Panthers. So I'll let you tackle that one.
Oh, man. It's tough, but I think I'm going to go with Floyd. I don't always like, unless it's, you have an elite one and then one with a great matchup like Miller. I don't really always, or it's, I have Julius Thomas and Travis Kelce a few times this week, and I think we already know how I feel about that. Normally, I don't like rolling out two tight ends a ton, and so Miller is a good call there. But then I'm going to go with Mike Floyd and the other one. I think this is a game where the Cardinals are going to have to keep pace with the Broncos. I think Floyd's the number one receiver there. Stanton, it was a little worrisome. Had Larry Fitzgerald the first time that he started. But now I think he's looking Floyd's way. He's looking at John Brown. He's looking at those other guys. So I'm really excited about Michael Floyd this week. I think he could have a big game. Nobody really in the Denver secondary scares me a ton, and I think they might, based on name value, they might look at Fitzgerald more than Floyd. So I think he's got a pretty safe floor because this is going to be sort of a shootout situation.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I wasn't leaning strongly towards Floyd either. That brings us to our last question here. It's from my boy Brett Childs. You should all take a look at him on Twitter. He's a New York Red. It's an awesome Twitter account. A lot of soccer stuff, a lot of good stuff there. So take a look at a New York Red, and he asks, so that's at a New York Red. He's in a league where he needs 3 spots to fill. He asks Michael Floyd, Golden Tate, Brandon Cooks, Reggie Wayne, or Doug Martin. So I'll start this off. I'm going to tackle 2 of these that I think are lock plays. If you disagree, Matt, put in your other guys, and then I want you to tackle the last guy of the remaining 3. Does that work?
Sure. Go ahead.
All right. So my lock is Brandon Cooks. I talked about his matchup earlier on this podcast just to go over it. He's going to see a lot of Jonathan Banks, PFF's worst corner in the league, because he plays split end more. The Saints are going to have the ball a lot. The game flow works. It's a really good matchup. And I love Golden Tate as well. Calvin Johnson may be a little healthier. He's not going to be a decoy this week. But Tate's matchup was good to begin with. He's going to see a lot of Nickel Roby on the Bills. This is a matchup he can take advantage of. And if Calvin is a little hurt, he'll probably get going again as the main target. Last week he was 8 for $116. I love Tate this week. So those are my 2. And then if you disagree, let me know. But besides from that, Matt, if you don't, let me know. Out of Michael Floyd, Reggie Wayne, and Doug Martin, who do you see?
Okay, so Michael Floyd, Reggie Wayne, Doug Martin.
And then Cooks and Tate, if you disagree.
You know what? I think you made the right calls there, honestly. Cooks is a for sure one. The only way I differ is I might go Michael Floyd over Golden Tate. But, at the same time, I think Tate is a good play. We saw it. Actually, honestly, I think I'm going to go Floyd over Tate just a little bit because I trust more that there are going to be more points scored in that game than the Lions and the Bills. I still want to see Kyle Orton if he can lead this team in kind of one of these shootout situations. Like I think that the Cardinals-Broncos game is. So I'm going to go Floyd over Tate. That's where I would differ. But Cooks for sure I think is a good play this week.
Yeah, I agree. Cool.
Rock and roll. Well, that is way more than all the time we have. We've gone a long show today, which I really like to. Dan's a great guy to talk football with every week. We enjoy answering all your questions, and we appreciate how many of them we get. I mean, it's a little surprising to me sometimes, like I said, that people really care about this so much. But I love it. I love it. I love answering questions, and and doing the best we can to help you all out. That's what we're here for. That's why we spent so much time on this. So great to talk to you again this week, Dan, and we'll do it again next week. So everybody come back for the show then. Any closing thoughts from you, my friend?
Yeah, just another great show. I'm glad it went a little longer. Thanks for it. Just has to do with all the questions we got. And I'm really happy about that. And yeah, great talking football with you, Matt, as always. Good luck this week.
Yeah, same to you. Oh yeah, right. We'll see. Like I said, you'll never hear from me again if I win something like that. But yeah, great week again, and glad we had no technical difficulties this time around. Appreciate everybody sticking out with us, and we'll catch you all next week. So good luck to everyone out there.
Yeah, good luck, guys.